It's so nice to be here again. For all of you who are new, the Bainbridge Island Historical Museum has it used to be called Bainbridge Remembers Oral History, and it was sharing people's stories down at the Senior Center, over at the Senior Center, and it was really wonderfully popular, so maybe some of you had been there. And we went online, and wonderful Reed Price has welcomed us as to continue online. So we're learning how to do that, and we're going to be having a program every second Monday, just like right now. And my name's Katie Curtis. I'm the Education Outreach Manager, Education and Outreach Manager at the Historical Museum. And today, I'm very excited that we're going to be welcoming Steve Parsons. And before we begin, I'd like to just honor the land that we're on. The Bainbridge Island Historical Museum is, and where we gather here, is within the Aboriginal territory of Tissaquah, the people of this clear salt water. Expert fishermen, canoe builders, basket weavers, Suquamish people live in harmony with the lands and waterways along Washington's Central Salish Sea, as they have for thousands of years. And I express that with great appreciation. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce someone special to me and a wonderful Bainbridge Islander, Steve Parsons. He and I met each other through a meditation opportunities, and Steve lives here, and he and his partner had a business here, and he has worked with the students here on the island, and he has some wonderful stories to tell. So Steve, go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit. Also, let us know just what does living on Bainbridge Island mean to you?
Thank you, Katie. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. It's an honor, a real honor. Wow. A little bit about me and my little background here. I was raised back east in West Virginia, and we're called holler people in the hollers of West Virginia and mountaineers. I got out, so I was able to manage, with the help of my father, who was a Rolling Stone. Moved us first to Selma, Alabama. He was a crop duster back in the 50s, and then Birmingham. This is long before the Civil Rights March. Then we eventually made our way out to the west, Salt Lake City, where I ended up coming out of the closet there and the theater department at the University of Utah, and made my way to Hollywood by the direction of an agent that discovered me on stage, which sounds like a story that should be a movie, but it ended in a way that my tail was between my legs, and I was humbled by the fact that there was far more talent than other people than I had. And eventually I made myself back to the Northwest, where my father had settled back in the late 60s, early 70s. Then I finally settled on Capitol Hill with a flower shop I had on Broadway back in the late 70s and during the 80s, during the AIDS crisis. And eventually through that, I made it through the AIDS crisis unscathed, except I lost a lot of friends, a lot of people. Probably 50 to 75% of the community was lost. And subsequently, I had survivor's guilt because I was one of very few people that survived that AIDS crisis. And I went back to college and got my 2 degrees in psychology and at Antioch, and became a therapist, an AIDS activist. Eventually made my way over to Kitsap County and worked with the health department, the HIV/AIDS program, as a grief and loss counselor. My late husband, Bill McKnight, and I decided to move to Port Orchard, where the real estate values were better and we could have a decent home. And he commuted into Seattle, and I worked for the health department at that time. From there, I was part of the creation of a nonprofit organization called Gay County, which eventually turned into Out Kitsap, and then eventually it's now Kitsap Pride. But our main purpose was to empower gays and lesbians in a disenfranchised community like Port Orchard and Bremerton back in the 80s, and to help empower them by conducting classes. We had queer bingo, which was an event that we would bring in 200 to 300 people each Friday night, and that was a way. There was no activities back then at all for the gay community. We did live in Port Orchard downtown off of Sydney, my husband and I, and we fixed up our front yard like all gay men tend to do.
You can say that.
I don't want to stereotype us, but we do tend to fixate on certain artistic abilities we have. We won the Mayor's Award for Best Landscape Yard. Mm-hmm. And that weekend in the Independent, Port Orchard Independent, there was a headline that says, "Gay couple wins Mayor's Award." Mm-hmm. We were horrified. I mean, it was an honor to get that, but at the same time, we didn't want that attention brought to us. And it had the picture of our home and the address. Mm-hmm. And the following weekend, we had a cross in our front yard.
No. Oh my gosh.
So with that, we kind of put our heads together and thought, well, maybe we should see other alternatives, besides Port Orchard. So we checked out Bainbridge Island, and that's how we eventually arrived in Bainbridge. And we opened up the shop in 2001, Bill McKnight Design, which was located at the old Buckley & Buckley real estate office until his death in 2008.
So you said that you had a sense that saying that kind of a headline,
yes.
Port Orchard at the time, and this was in the late 90s or early 2000s?
Like 97, 98.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so that you had a sense that there was already fear, that you knew that there was when you saw it, so you worried about it. So had you experienced unfriendliness before that in Port Orchard, or was that generally because of living as a gay couple, as a gay man?
Well, you have to realize, coming from Broadway on Capitol Hill for about 15 years, I lived there as a gay man. There was no resistance about being gay. I mean, there was a few outsiders that would come in occasionally, but there was nothing that we felt that was homophobic. So when we saw that article with the headlines, it just so happened that down the street in a house, there was a huge plate glass window in their home, in their living room, with a Confederate flag waving in the front. So that was kind of a red flag, excuse the pun, for us to be aware of. Maybe we're not in Centerville, USA. We were in a place that maybe wasn't as friendly as we thought we would like it to be. So it was frightening. It frightened both Bill and I. We had the police. The policeman came to investigate the incident, and God bless him. He said, "Well, I've always wanted to see the inside of your house. Do you mind if I come in and see your home?" So he kind of dismissed it a little bit, but we took it very seriously, and I'm so glad we moved to Bainbridge. It's home to us. It's home to me right now.
Yeah. Well, there have been different incidents on Bainbridge, and we had Aaron Leidick, as you know, talk a little bit about that white nationalism type stuff going on. But I'm glad that you felt more welcome on Bainbridge. So do you have any memory of just like kind of the difference when you finally found your home here? And do you have a little story you can tell about what made you feel welcome here on Bainbridge?
Well, we opened the store 2 weeks after 9/11.
Oh.
And after that, things were pretty shut down at that time. But once things got going again and people started coming out of their homes, people discovered our store, and all of a sudden we started getting invitations from strange people or not strange people, but strangers, I should say, that we did not know, but they were, frequent customers of ours at the store. And they would invite us out to dinner. They would invite us over to greet us and meet us and just want to know something. We never had that happen anywhere where we lived at all. And that was just such a welcome. I mean, it was like, I don't want to say like they were trying to collect us, but they were really trying to greet us and meet us and make us feel comfortable here on Bainbridge. It was even to this day, it makes my heart flutter about how wonderful that extension of acceptance was for us. And we needed it at that time after what we've been through.
Yeah. That's so fantastic. I can remember a story where Kay Nakau, who was a checker, at TNC for years, and she told stories about inviting people over, that she didn't know to dinner. And, it is kind of it's a very friendly thing to do, is to go ahead and invite people over when, they're newer to the island. It's great.
I think the biggest, if I can get through this part without tearing up too much, but when Bill finally passed away in 2008.
Sorry.
Thank you. It was a quick death. It was mesothelioma, asbestos poisoning of the lung. We had his service at the BPA, the theater. Overwhelming. People were outside on the courtyard. It was so full of people. And I remember coming out of the service afterwards, and it was like this surrounding of love and care that I'd never experienced before. Everyone just came around me and was asking me how I was doing, consoling me, and just handing me tissues right and left. we were all sobbing and crying at the time. But it was just something I'd never, ever experienced before. That outpouring of support and condolences for me. It was wonderful. It was a very, very loving kindness act that I had not experienced.
And so you've been here for,
20 years.
Yeah, 20 years. And Bill has been gone since 2008. So that's over 10 years, and you decided to stay. And
yeah, I did leave for a brief period of time after his death. I went to Palm Springs for a season just to get off the island, because everywhere I looked, I saw Bill and all our friends would, they console me, but it was like I just needed a break. So, and then I came back. It wasn't very long, but this is definitely a home for me.
That's great. That's wonderful. So then part of what you did was, as a therapist, you worked with Bainbridge Youth Services.
Correct.
And ran the queer club there with some of the youth on Bainbridge. And so I was just wondering, like, I know it's like presumptuous to say, but like, is there ways in which you feel like Bainbridge could be more welcoming to queer youth or queer people? Or do you feel like we can underscore some of the good things that we're doing and that you've heard about the experience?
I have to be honest. I'm amazed at the outpouring of acceptance, especially remember last summer, it was the 50th anniversary of Stonewall. And we had the 50th, it was the beginning of the gay liberation movement in '69.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We had a huge celebration down on the waterfront park. We always have a contingency in the 4th of July parade.
That's right.
The queer youth, you know, it's not passe, but it's like, it's not the issue it was back in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
But we had half the people in our support group in the queer community were straight, heterosexual kids that wanted to support the queer community. And I mean, we're talking back in the early 2000, 99, I'm sorry, 99.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know what it's like on the high school now, but I know back then it was accepting, but it's far more accepting. We've leaped years ahead of ourselves, and just the movement of acceptance, and especially in the trans community. That is a huge evolution of that movement. And unfortunately, the trans community, especially women of color, are one of the highest rates of being accosted or murdered in our community.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, do you have another fun Bainbridge story that you'd like to share about your experience of the island, and just how the parts that make it welcoming like that?
Well, I can walk down the street and go to my local coffee shop in Winslow, and I can see and wave at probably anywhere from 5 to 10 people that either know me or have been in our shop or knew of my being a therapist. They knew my background. And what a feeling of acceptance that is. I have never had that small town, hometown feeling where you can walk and be a part of a group and your sexuality is not an issue. They want to know the substance of your character. And that's the biggest story that I can tell you, is that acceptance of the community from me. And especially after Bill's death, it was like this cocoon of people just coming around and always checking in on me, wanting to know how I was doing, what was next in my life. I had some health issues after Bill died, and people have been, I moved to the park here, the trailer park and on the island. And that's another microcosm of a wonderful community. This community at the park is just, they're wonderful. They have been, I open up my door and there's a pie or there's a bouquet of flowers at my door that I have no idea who they're from or what, but I've never experienced that before. I mean, we moved so much, I guess I didn't have any roots anywhere, but finally being in some place for 20 years, and especially Bainbridge, it's an experience I never thought I'd encounter. I mean, I'm 71 years old, and my dear, things have changed a lot in 50, 60 years since I was coming out of the closet in Salt Lake City in the 60s.
Yeah, well, it's nice to feel some progress, especially these days when things are really feeling stuck, and so as far as civil rights and social justice goes. So that's a great theme. We
haven't arrived.
No.
We have a long ways to go.
Yeah. So let's see. I was wondering. I just have a question for you. This is a little out of the blue, but do you appreciate it when people identify their pronouns?
That's kind of a movement after the fact of me being politically active. I'm getting adjusted to that myself. When I see that on an application or some kind of form that I'm signing and they are asking what pronoun, I'm I'm pleasantly happy about it, but I'm still getting used to the fact that that's, wow, I mean,
Yeah.
that's an amazing feat that we've come, and a very short, I mean, it's been coming for years, but Obama certainly did help us along with a lot of things
Mm-hmm.
like this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not to give you my political persuasion here.
Yeah. It does seem so much more inclusive. It is hard to get, it's always hard to get used to things. And there's just an uplift when someone will introduce themselves, she, her, that kind of thing, but it takes some things. Yeah. So let's see. Do you have any tips, like not exactly tips, but what kinds of ways have you heard are something that we could learn from your experience? What I'm thinking about is that it sounded like you guys were very outgoing, and I'm thinking that you two were outgoing and you had a chance to be in front of our community. And I'm thinking people that might move here, that might not be seen or might not be, present as white male. And have you been able to reach out to people in the LGBTQ community that aren't, like, might not feel that kind of welcome,
I understand. I think my advice would be, I mean, I was a therapist. I've been involved with the queer youth movement here on the island. B-Flag, I started a chapter of that. I have been out there, and to tell you the truth, I'm pretty introverted and shy, and Bill was extremely shy. So to have all this outpouring of love and people inviting us to come over was kind of uncomfortable for us, but for the community that's moving onto the island now, if you want to be involved in a wonderful community experience, volunteer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Volunteer in something you love doing, whether it's with the queer community or not. Assimilate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of my biggest aspirations of my life. I thought, if I can live in a community and be a part of the community and not be identified as Steve, the gay man,
Mm-hmm.
it's Steve that volunteers at children's boutique, or just get out there and volunteer and make yourself, you don't have to be an extrovert. I mean, introverts volunteers too, So I think that if you can, when Bill passed away, and not to toot his horn or my horn, but I started a scholarship program through Pride Foundation, and that's a way to give back to the community in any way, especially if you're older, gay, lesbian, bi, trans, the queer community. Give back to the community in some ways that you feel good about, that would help the next generation of our youth to prosper and feel good about themselves. Because in my lifetime, suicide was an option all the time in my mind. It was a lot, because if you grew up in the South and grew up in a religious household, there was no chance that you're going to just automatically accept yourself as a gay or lesbian person, because it was very judgmental. And especially, I was telling somebody the other day, I said, as a gay white man, I can walk out of my house and go into Seattle, and I can cover as a straight white man.
Yeah.
But if I walk out of my house and leave Bainbridge and go to Seattle, and I'm a gay black man, my blackness doesn't go away. I can't just pass as a gay man. So I don't know where that took me. I don't know where I went with where that came from.
Well, yeah, well, it is definitely, I think, part of the education that this group actually this at the senior center has been diving deep into that fact that some of us can pass as at least maybe as white people or as straight, people and that kind of thing, and realizing that when we live in this white, supremacy culture, that there are things that we just can't imagine other people, have to go through. And so I know it's been a passion for a lot of the people that I've heard on these conversations to learn more about that. And I think that when Karen Vargas was talking to us about being Black on the island, she said that even in some of the churches, people didn't look at her or certainly didn't invite them over. And I can remember being a new person in a new town when I was abroad, and that was something that people did, was invite people over or invite people to coffee and that kind of thing. So I think that there's a key thing about being welcoming and being inviting people. And I've said it on this call before that, the Suquamish people, they had so much abundance that I've been taught that with the abundance and the beautiful weather here that's so much more neutral, that they were able to be hospitable. So I feel like that hospitality is it's
been here.
It's been here, but with the affluenza that we've been facing, it's been really challenging to be awake to how the white supremacy works, in our society. So I wanted to let you have another opportunity to tell a little bit more about, maybe you could tell us more about the scholarship. If we had, someone queer in our family that needed a scholarship and we'd like to honor you or Bill, or is there anything that you'd like to just let us know about the scholarship?
Sure. I mean, it's for one thing, it's through the Pride Foundation in Seattle, which is the gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual questioning community. It's for those people that are in need, and our scholarship program is called the Bill McKnight and Steve Parsons Legacy Scholarship Program.
Mm-hmm.
And I only had so much money, so it's a scholarship that could receive additional funding from the community if others wanted to contribute to it. I guess that's one plug for a scholarship program. But under Bill's name, we wanted to honor the arts and humanities because he was such a creative person. And for me, I have a disability called dyslexia, which it wasn't until I was 33 that I realized I couldn't read, that I memorized words. And so the scholarship under my name is for those who are facing disabilities, emotional, psychological, other disabilities that relate to their learning experience. So we have arts and humanities, and we have the learning disability, two different segments that are both important to Bill and myself.
Yeah, well, it'd be great to share into those, and it's great to know about those for the queer kids that we might know.
Yeah, well, they're available.
They're an observation, if I may. You don't know me, unfortunately, Steve, but I know you guys, and I always appreciated the creativity of your shop. I mean, you go in there and it was like going into a design center, and I still have things here at home that we really cherish. And I think about you a lot because we have a lamp here and some pillows here and this and that there. And these are all things that I remember buying from you guys and enjoying the conversation and the talk and the Bainbridge Island way, really, together. And I miss that shop very much, and I'm delighted that you're on here today. And I just wanted to let you know that we have some things that remind us of you here at 724s.
Thank you so much. That was all Bill. That was all Bill. I was behind the scene and he was the design force. A lot of people didn't know, but Bill was the director of Nordstrom's visual merchandising for 20 years. So everyone wanted Bill on their team to design something, whether it was after he left Nordstrom's, he went to Callison Architecture and he designed like the interior for REI, Raffles in Hong Kong, Singapore. He was internationally known, but you would never know it by the way he held himself. He was so shy and so introverted. He was not a bragger at all. So, but thank you for your feedback about the shop. I appreciate that.
You're welcome, and we're just delighted to have enjoyed the two of you, and now you here on Bainbridge for many, many years. So look forward to seeing you and passing on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'd like to add something, Steve. This is Ann Lovejoy. I remember hiring Bill to come help me at Bainbridge Gardens and train the staff how to make attractive presentations. And he was so charming. It's like he had all these amazing international clients, but he was not above helping out in a very small way in his own little community and coming in and just charming everyone into being receptive to new information. And he said all the same stuff I did, but they actually listened to him.
That was that white male privilege, maybe.
Yeah,
That was
exactly.
his charming style. He was very engaging.
I remember we had just been together for probably less than a year, and we went back to New York for one of the gift shows for the shop. And we went into Fifth Avenue, walking down Fifth Avenue in New York City, and I'm totally intimidated by the wealth and the exquisite shops. We walked into this one shop, and I was like, I'm not worthy of going into this shop. We opened up these two beautiful doors and this big grand staircase and this opulent design of a shop for men's clothing. And out of the back woodwork, somebody goes, Bill McKnight. And I'm going, oh my God, people know him in New York City. Who is this man? I didn't even know who I married at the time. And he was so understated, he would never brag about anything. He was just that kind of a man.
Does anybody have a question? I have one.
I have more of a comment. As the mother of a transgender younger person, I was really struck by the way this community has really been very, on the whole, extremely kind and accepting. And I wasn't so sure how that was going to go. And I don't know that my daughter was either. But we found over the past few years that, in fact, Bainbridge really is a very accepting environment. It's not always true when you step off the island so much, but by and large, it has been. And when Alexis came out to me as transgender, I asked her permission and started a parenting group called Transfriending, a support group for family and friends and allies. And it's been so beautiful to hear stories from all over the place, all over the Kitsap Peninsula and beyond, that many communities that 5 years ago or 10 years ago were not accepting have actually have softened and become more accepting of especially transgender kids. But as Steve was saying earlier, of everybody in the queer community, it's so much more acceptable now than it was. There's still so much to do, so much further to go. But I find that increasing openness is just so healing and soothing to my spirit.
Thank you. Thank you.
I know when just another can you imagine living in West Virginia in 1958 or 59 and realizing you were different in a way that you didn't even understand? And the other kids, of course, the bullying was going on all the time. If you were different or shy, or the weakest link always got picked on. And I realized back then, early on, that I needed to get out of that situation. It was kind of like a mini version of Port Orchard, that situation. But this was back when I was a young teenager and realizing I was different. And how far we've come. I mean, it is amazing. I am just like blown away. And Bill was not the activist that I was. I was out in the front lines. Bill was an activist by being a mentor, being the good person that he was. And I would hope that if anything, Bill was the mentor that people could duplicate and honor just because he was a person of decent qualities.
Mm-hmm. Sounds so wonderful. Yeah. I'm wondering about the connection that you said you referred to it. I want to go back to what's similar and different about the AIDS pandemic and what you've experienced, through the COVID-19, just in terms of information dissemination and, that kind of response that the world is giving. Do you have any?
Oh, yes.
Here?
I have a lot of insights. It's like there's a huge parallel that's going on, but in a different way. It's like there's that fear factor. Did you hear? I mean, I was on Broadway on Ground Zero in the 80s. And I remember going to a Thanksgiving dinner when one of the doctors told us back in 81 that was this new gay plague coming about, this mysterious plague that was killing gay men in New York and San Francisco. And it's kind of the same thing that we heard the information from China, that there's this new influenza or something that we don't know about that's killing people. And that automatically sends chills down my spine regarding, I remember this. I remember this very well, except we were dying. If you got diagnosed with HIV/AIDS, you were dead within months. I mean, coronavirus, yes, also, but it wasn't just one. It is people of color that's being hit by this pandemic mostly, which is, to me, brought everything to a head, an explosive head in the last 6 months, which that's a whole nother subject. But the parallels between the pandemic and the AIDS epidemic is mind-boggling. We didn't go into seclusion or lockdown, but we were the ones that did survive, watched our colleagues, our brothers or sisters fall down. They fell very quickly. And back then we didn't have the support. I mean, the president at the time wouldn't even say the word AIDS until the end of this last quarter of his term. So yes, it's different. Yes, there's a lot of parallels, and unfortunately the minorities in both cases, the AIDS crisis and the pandemic we're living through, both are hitting a minority group that people and the different administrations are not supporting and have not supported. And I think we're going to see a big paradigm shift. I hope so. And acknowledging all of this.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered your question or not, but
yeah,
I always have an opinion about something.
Well, yeah, and I remember, and I think it might still be true that sadly, that the AIDS really ended up impacting people, women of color, and the resources that they didn't have, really it ended up being there. So it'd be interesting to analyze a little bit about how can we move towards really serving everybody, you know, in a health crisis like this.
And even back in the 80s, and I'm very apologetic to the people of color. They were the last ones to get the services that they needed.
Mm-hmm.
And within our own gay community, the white privilege showed its ugly head in a subtle way by not acknowledging them first. I mean, it was like, okay, we have to deal with AIDS. That includes everybody, but people of color, they had a double whammy with their, not only their own oppression by being in their own, and I hate to bring this up, but the religious community was not fair to the people of color during the AIDS crisis, because if you had AIDS, you were ostracized, especially the people of and different religious backgrounds and people of color. So they had a double whammy, not only with their white gay brothers, but of their own families and their own community ostracized.
Thank you so much.
Steve, this is Lawrence Chan and Bonnie Chan. We're new to the island, and we want to thank you for sharing your stories this morning. And we are finding Bainbridge Island a very tolerant place, and we just love it here. And thanks for all of your efforts, and we're here to support you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I look forward to meeting you one of these days.
We hope so. Thank you.
Well, they're regulars on this call, Steve. So now that you have the app, you can join us 11:30. And with that, I guess what I'll do is I'll wrap up. And I appreciate everyone's bringing their interest and their heartfelt appreciation for Steve, and for coming to this hear our oral histories of the island.